Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of The Family Business. I am excited to bring to you Ariel Sutton. Ariel and I go back a long time, and she is exceptional across the board in every category. And I wanted to make sure that everyone else knew it as well. So Ariel, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you for having me today.
It was an easy decision, that's for sure. The way we usually start is just a quick 45 seconds to a minute of what you're doing now, just so people can get some context of who you are, and then we can delve into your background, which is deep.
Sure. So I'm leading the commercial team at Imperative Care. For those who may not be familiar with the company, we are singularly focused on stroke, thinking about the patient really from stroke onset all the way through to rehabilitation to address unanswered questions in stroke. Matt, I know you know the stroke area, and time is brain, and we feel that urgency as a company. So our first set of products is really around innovative catheter technologies. We've developed essentially a new market category called the Large Distal Platform, or LDP. And this is really changing the way physicians are starting access for their stroke procedures. So today, physicians are generally parking their base catheter in the neck. And with the LDP, it allows them to take that base catheter into the brain or intracranial. So they're right there at the treatment site. And then our second set of products is really called the Zoom Stroke Solution. And this is an aspiration system that we've built from the ground up. So for us, it's really about making the devices easier and the procedures easier, faster, and more consistent for better outcomes.
Yeah, stroke has always been, for me, kind of the undiscovered country when it comes to medical technology. Certainly there are other areas to explore that need time, investment, and resources, but stroke has always been so much of an unknown. From the day I came in, for that 3-hour window that you have to treat somebody, you never know when that 3-hour clock starts. It was always so fascinating to me. And so I've just been thrilled that people have been focused on not just saving someone's life, because saving someone's life when there's no quality of life afterwards, honestly, isn't that much of a savings if they can't walk, they can't speak, they can't feed themselves, they can't. So I just think it's phenomenal that you guys are doing everything you can to make sure those people recover.
Well, thank you. It is one of the leading causes of disability in the United States, so it is so important.
Well, that's the biggest thing that I always try to do when I tell a story about why someone might want to consider a new opportunity. Was that most of the reason what brought you over here? Because I know the investors there are serious and the people who work there are fantastic. You have a lot of reasons why you'd want to go there. But what was the impetus initially?
Yeah, for me, there's really been a few things that have driven my career choices. I would say the first, Matt, has often been really the team. I've been fortunate enough to really interact with some, stars in the med device space. Leslie Trigg I've worked with, who I know you know well, Greg Cachero, and I've had a long-standing relationship with Fred Khosravi, who's a serial entrepreneur in the Bay Area. And he and I have stayed close over the years. And he came to me and actually said, Ariel, I'm so excited about this opportunity that I can't sleep at night. And this is coming from somebody who has started 23 companies. So when he can't sleep at night, that this is a really special opportunity. So, for me, it was, first and foremost, being able to work again with a group that I know really has a proven track record. We work well together. And then, this opportunity to really be able to create a meaningful company. Our goal is really to become a stroke strategic in this space.
It's always my hope that every company I work with, that somehow we bring some new technology that helps patients and physicians and nurses. I mean, that's always the goal. Is the money's always a byproduct of it. If you're successful and you do it right, then the money
100%.
follows. But it's the drive for a therapy or some particular way to offset someone's suffering is what hopefully is what pushes everybody. So it pushes us here, and I've known you long enough to know that that's your driver as well.
very much
Yeah.
so.
So along the way, though, you've built this family of yours. It's very testosterone laden
Or,
in
exactly.
your
A lot
house.
of
So
wrestling in our house,
so
Matt.
what's that?
I said a lot of wrestling in our house.
Yeah. No, I don't have as much that I have a boy and a girl, and it's more mental warfare than it is anything else. But let's touch on some of that. Now you have 3 boys. What are their ages?
So we have a 13-year-old Ben, a 10-year-old, 11-year-old Avi, and an 8-year-old Jude.
Okay, so how often are things broken in your house?
Well, given that we have the handyman on speed dial, that probably gives you a sense.
I mean, I remember
In
getting
general, I would say they're good, but every once in a while, we
those are
have
those are
all-out warfare in our house.
those are just the things you don't know about. I mean, my brother and I destroyed our home and just tried to fix things with paper clips and duct tape, so my mom didn't see it. So I'm sure there's some of those things going on that you're going to find out later in life that they
For
use.
sure.
Yeah.
Well, a funny story, Matt. We had a physician come visit our office, and I went to pick him up at the hotel, and I was putting his luggage into the trunk of my car, and one of the children had been great, so I'd actually taken their supply of Nerf guns, and I had put it in the trunk of my car, and it was like literally taking up about.
I was going to say, did it fill it? Yeah. That's awesome. We went through a whole Nerf gun debate, and when we finally gave him the green light, he happened to have a birthday, my son, right around that time, and he wound up getting like 25 gifts
of Nerf guns.
And they're little, I wouldn't call them bullets, but whatever it is they shoot. And
yes.
Yeah, and yeah. There's a lot of that going on. So along the way, you've had like this significant ascent in your career. I mean, you've accomplished quite a bit. Folks, if you don't know Ariel, take a look at her LinkedIn profile. I mean, starting from being a Fulbright scholar and going to Brown and being educationally or academically as strong as anyone that I work with, she did what's most important is made use of it. And so I'm curious, like, what happens? You get that type of education, and then you go to Kellogg for an MBA, and now you have to turn around and apply it. Talk about first, like, your family before you met Tom, before you got married, of your own kids. How did your family encourage you to become so not just driven, because driven and not being successful is just frustrated, and you're both. So give me some insight of what you grew up with and how they were encouraging you, because I know you have siblings as well. So can you give me some kind of context of what that was like for you?
Absolutely. Well, I grew up in New Jersey, so I'm a true Jersey girl at heart. And I had really supportive parents, Matt, who always really put their children first, and really worked with each of myself, and I have 2 older brothers, to find our passion and really develop us. So I was a figure skater growing up. My
Is that right? See, this is what I was telling you before we started.
Yeah,
There's always something that I
exactly.
don't know about somebody. So how far did you take the figure skating?
Really far. So I used to get up at 4:30 in the morning before school, and my dad would drive me to the skating rink before work. I would practice for a couple hours, and then he would drop me off at school. And often my mom would then pick me up in the afternoon. We'd go back to the rink for another couple hours. And I progressed through all of the, to the senior level. And did it all through high school.
Huh.
Yeah.
I mean, that is one of the more underrated as far as arduous and the time you have to put in, and obviously getting ice time at the crack of dawn. I mean, the level of commitment, usually swimming is around the same, where it's that just intense level of commitment. How did you deal with that? What's that?
Yeah, it shows the characteristics of my parents, right? Yeah. Because it's a huge financial investment as well. And so, as a result, we didn't travel much as a family. My figure skating was, a big commitment, not only for me and my parents, but, sacrifices from my brothers. But what my parents did is, for each of my brothers, they, found their passions and helped develop those as well. My oldest brother, he is a partner at an agency in Hollywood. He works with, the rich and famous.
Is that right?
he had, in high school, he developed a passion for TV and film. And I don't know how my mom did it, but she somehow managed to convince the principal of the high school that my brother got to spend like 3 periods working in the television studio at the school. So, my parents always, really tried to understand, what drove us, and then really find that passion. So, I think it's one of the things that has made me successful in the medical device field is I love what I do, Matt. I love that there is a greater purpose in what we do in this career, that we're helping patients and their families, and I think that that's really important, to be able to make somebody successful.
Now, you were at Texas Instruments originally, though, so you weren't in healthcare right away. Were you thinking of a technical background and technical career first, and then you kind of stumbled into the medical side, or was that intentional?
Yeah, so interestingly, and a little bit back to my parents, my mom worked in special education within a school system, and my dad was a statistician. So, I was always good at math and science, but I really didn't have a role model of what an engineer did. And it was my mom who really encouraged me. My junior year in high school, she found this program at the Stevens Institute of Technology that took high school juniors and allowed them to, it was actually a program just for females, and they were trying to encourage women in engineering.
Yep.
And that really was one of the key things that changed the course of my life and career, because I don't think I ever would have considered doing engineering prior to that program, and that really directed me into doing engineering at Brown. I had always had a passion for biology and had thought about pre-med, and what I found in the engineering program is that it was really collaborative. The way all of the engineering courses worked is you got together in groups, and it was bring best ideas together to really create something innovative. And so I decided actually in college to drop the pre-med track and really pursue the engineering path, and then that led me to Texas Instruments, which was my first career after spending the year in Israel as a Fulbright.
Yeah, well, geez, there's a lot to unpack there, Ariel.
Yeah.
All right, so you were in the technical space for a bit. It sounds like you managed to find a significant other or better half at that as well. So not only did you start building your career, but you also managed to start building your family. Tell me quick, how'd you meet Tom?
Yeah, so we actually work together, I tend to be a little bit more on the serious side. Tom is a real comedian, and they say opposites attract, and it's worked really well. And I have always been really career driven, Matt, and I think we decided early in our relationship, and Tom has always been super supportive. Where he's said to me, I will, be the one who, takes the greater load with the children and allows me to really be able to excel and have the career that I've had. You can't do it alone. You definitely need that partner.
You do, and you need to communicate is one of the things that you just said that I think gets lost in the sauce a bit of how that all happens, because it takes you speaking up, saying that this is how you feel, and it takes him speaking up saying, okay, I'm good with it. This is what I feel. This is what I think. And because my wife and I went through it. My wife is similar to you in a lot of ways, actually. And I carried the brunt for a few years. And now the tables have flipped a bit, which is kind of interesting how that happened. And now I'm like, oh, so this is how this feels. It's worked out well, and I love it, and it's all been fine. But it's been an interesting scenario on our
really
side.
Important, Matt. I don't know if you found this, but I think the fact that Tom and I both work has been incredibly valuable for our relationship. We both travel, and for each of us to be able to appreciate what the other one goes through in travel, because it's easy to kind of look at the person who's going off to travel and think, oh, they're going on vacation. And
Yep.
but when you travel, at least for me, I'm often up at 6:30 in the morning, and I'm going until 11 or 12
It's
at
not
night.
glamorous.
Yeah, it's not glamorous. And then the person who's at home, especially in our family situation, now you're trying to manage 3 children, with no help. So the fact that we both can appreciate, when you walk back in the door from that business trip, we both now, it's not, okay, I've been with the kids, it's your turn. It's like, okay, I know you're tired, go rest. Tomorrow we'll sort of, shift loads.
It's interesting because the more people I talk to about this very specific topic, the coming back home from the trip, my wife calls it burning up on reentry, and I've told the story a couple times, so I won't belabor the point. But I'm curious for you, like, you're able to come in and literally transition on the spot?
No, what I'm saying is we give the person who's coming in the opportunity to go rest and be fresh the next day, and that's when the transition happens.
Well, that's very fair, because that's not the way it happens in my house. But that's because that's the thing. You come in, you put your bags down.
That's generally what we try.
Awesome. Now, so the boys have been like a steady incoming flood of kids into your life, and so as you've made these choices that you've gone from company to company, if we can walk through just a couple of the career decisions that you've had and how it related to when you started having your boys, like, how did you decide, okay, this is a good time for me to make this choice, or the opposite, which is I can't make that choice now. I just had a newborn, or I'm pregnant, or I'm planning on having a second or third, or whatever the case may be. I'm curious about your career choices as it relates to your family.
Yeah, so my first move into an earlier stage company was Fox Hollow, which followed my experience at Johnson & Johnson LifeScan. And this was prior to kids, Matt. So Tom and I were married. When we had that discussion of, it always feels more risky to go to an earlier stage company that doesn't have, the same track record. But what really drew me to it was the opportunity. I felt like in a smaller company, you have sort of broader range of responsibility. And I was looking for that opportunity. And I was blown away by the people who I met with. It was really a star team that worked on that were leading the company with John Simpson, really as the founder. So that was my decision to join Fox Hollow. At Fox Hollow, I actually had 2 children. I will say Fox Hollow in many ways was a baby machine. I think that within our department, every 3 to 6 months, somebody was having a baby, which actually worked wonderfully, because I think we all really helped support one another, to make it work. Because we always knew somebody was going out on maternity leave, and we were going to have to fill in. From there,
let me ask you one question about that, because I've never asked this question, and I'm a little nervous, but I'm going to ask it anyway, because I've never known. Do women in general look out for each other in those kind of scenarios, or do they circle the wagon and say, look, I've got a second or third kid, or this is my first kid, and I can't think of anything else but my own? How does that all work? Because it sounds like you guys seem to become like a bit of a family of your own.
Yeah, no, for us, it was really a supportive environment. Everything leading up to having the baby, we would throw these like extravagant baby showers for one another. And through the process, I remember one of my colleagues giving me a book about, sleep patterns and, how to get your child, sleeping in that first 3 months, knowing that you were coming back to work. So I think we all really empathized with one another, and it was really supportive. It was to the point where on the weekends, we would, get the kids together at times. So I think that was really helpful in the early stages for me of parenting.
Well, it's this term of inclusion that we all talk about, in a different sense. Like you become almost inducted into their little fraternity or sorority, I suppose it is, where you're all kind of dealing with the same thing and everybody seems to understand what each other is dealing with. When you start half a sentence, they're like, I know exactly what you mean, and this is what I did. And, I mean, that's phenomenal. Who was leading that group? Was that your team, or was there someone?
So it started with Leslie Trigg,
Yeah.
and then eventually transitioned. There were a couple folks who led it, but I was leading it towards the end of my experience there.
Yeah, that's terrific. I'm glad to hear that you had that kind of experience. I don't know if everybody does, but I certainly would hope that most companies would form that kind of network within.
I think it's so important. You know, I mentioned, the importance of team in my decisions, and you really have to surround yourself with great people. And I think, not only professionally, but the folks that can really appreciate, the personal piece of what we're all trying to balance as well. And I've been blessed on that front with some really amazing leaders.
Yeah, and it trickles down, and now you're one of the top leaders that I work with, and people who've worked for you vouch for you to the nth degree, and so it's success begets success in that kind of scenario. So these other decisions that you've made since Fox Hollow, because although Access Closure was relatively small when you went there. I mean, what were your thoughts?
Small. Yeah, it was about 4 million when I joined, and when I left, our sales were over 100 million. I think a lot of it is also finding the environment that can support, what was important to Tom and I. I mentioned the travel piece being really important, for us. One of the things that I didn't share is, because we both travel, it was always really important to us that both of us were not traveling at the same time. We always wanted the kids to know that one of their parents would be home with them. We don't have family local in the area to help. And in my entire career, we've literally only had one time that Tom and I both had to be away overnight. It was when Ben was about a year old. I think it was more traumatizing to us than it was, to him, for sure. And then until really recently, we've been able to really avoid that. Right before COVID hit, we were going to have another situation, and we had planned for it. We have a wonderful sitter who was going to stay overnight. And Tom's conference ended up getting canceled because of COVID, and we didn't end up in that situation. But so that's one piece that's important. Another piece that's really important is we always have had family dinner, and it's been important for me that, it's a part of the day that we can all be together.
What happens at the family dinner? I mean, you got 3 boys. I'm surprised if the food stays on their plate.
Yeah. Well, often the food's almost gone by the time I get to actually sit down at the table. I don't know if you've have that in your house as well.
Nah, there's a lot of standing at my house. There's not a lot of sitting when we eat. My son, he's very mobile while he's eating, and my daughter's usually dancing.
I hear some rustling in the background. I don't know if you want to hear the kid or meet my kids.
Yeah, of course. Come on.
Oh, we've got the dog as well. Okay, this is Avi. Here. This is Wally.
Oh, Wally.
Hello, Wally.
This is Jude. Come on over here so they can see you. This is Jude.
Awesome. Jude, I heard the talent show went well. Is that true?
Oh, say it again, Matt. I don't think he heard you.
So how was the talent show?
Any kids? Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah? Did the song go the way you expected?
Yeah.
Awesome. Do you want to sing it?
I don't. We're just starting, so.
So this is a play that they're doing.
Oh, it's a play. I'm sorry, but I misunderstood.
The Hey Jude song was his tryout song for the play.
Got it. It's one of my favorite songs. I love the Beatles. All right, so I've known
Okay,
your...
boys, you want to head back upstairs?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wally.
Thanks for popping in.
And popping out.
And popping out, yeah. So this is, by the way, school.
Oh, is that right?
And work, all combined in one.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Yeah, it's a joke. So what is it like out there from, considering you have the air quality and fires going on and obviously COVID in school, like how is the community juggling all of this and how are you handling it?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a really crazy time, Matt. I think for everybody across the country, right? And um, it's really been interesting in the sense of, things that we didn't think were possible before are almost becoming the normal now. From a work environment, um, I couldn't have imagined, hiring somebody who worked in a different state for, the marketing team previously, because everybody needed to really be together, right? You wouldn't have somebody remote. And, now we're in a time where it's proven out that we can handle this remotely and work efficiently. There's obviously benefit to the team being together, and, we all miss that dearly. But what has, I think the positive that has come out of COVID is that it's shown us that we can be innovative and do things differently and still figure out how to make this be successful.
All right, so here's a curious piece for me because I normally don't get to see this side of it. Once I place somebody, usually it's a handoff and I check in from time to time, but I'm not as hands-on, obviously, because I'm not working there. How do you do onboarding now? How do you build camaraderie in a relationship now?
It's a great question. And I think we still have work to do on that front. A lot of it is obviously happening online. There are new technologies that we're discovering that allow us to, work together with, whiteboards where the team comes together, for sessions. A lot of the onboarding, though, right now, interestingly, we've been hiring a lot of individuals who have experience in the field, not in the field, like in the, working in stroke, so that you don't necessarily have to go through the whole education process on stroke, because that part of it is hard. To be able to get new hires in to watch cases in an environment where the hospitals, are being much more protective. So, we're being creative and, so far so good on that front.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's you can't make a flower open. It takes its time, and you guys eventually will build some rapport. And the world's not going to go back to what it was, even when and if this all comes back to some kind of feeling of comfort with COVID. It's not going to be, well, everyone's going to just go back to the office. It's not. It just isn't. I think that's going to be an improvement, honestly. I think it's something that needed to be done from a corporate standpoint because it was just really old-fashioned thinking. I'm just curious if people are going to get used to it because it's like putting on a new pair of jeans. In the beginning, it just kind of chafes a bit. So I got to ask, I got a dog during COVID. How has the dog been with the kids home all the time and you guys home all the time?
It's actually been a tremendous time to get a puppy. I will admit I was probably the one most resistant in the house just because I was concerned about having a fourth child.
Nope.
And you can see that we have another boy with our...
There's a pattern there.
But it's been a great time. I'd love to hear about your experience too, but the fact that we are all home, French bulldogs tend to like a lot of attention and they are family dogs. So the bonding period has been wonderful. And, just given, it has been a little bit of traumatic, for the kids, not, having the same social interaction and, being home and not having school. So I think having a dog has been helpful really for all of us to have, something fun and exciting, to divert our attention to.
All right, so there's always something. What does he eat? What does he do? what does he take? What does he? I mean, they all run away. They do something. They're in a perfect dog out there.
Well, it's funny that you say that because we've all been a little bit horrified. He likes to eat his own poop.
Mine eats the cat poop from out of the litter box. He thinks
that has been the ongoing fight. Is you have to clean up after him. If you don't clean up after him, this isn't going to work.
Yeah, and then they want to lick you, and afterwards, and you kind of have to. Yeah, I know. I know. That's really
but they're
funny.
So darn cute, right? You just What kind of dog did you get, Matt?
We wound up because there's some allergy questions in the house, we were always like, man, what can we do? We can't get a traditional dog because the dander and the fur and the hair everywhere. There's no way we could do it. So we read about a Bernese Mountain Dog, and they mix it with a poodle. It's called a Bernedoodle. And I became one of those people who jumped on a bandwagon of something that became very trendy, which I don't think I've ever done in my life. But my wife said, this is the dog for us. And I've been married long enough to know when I'm supposed to say yes. And I said, okay. And we have this, I refer to him as a wonderful nightmare. He's just 70 pounds and he's everywhere and he eats everything and he jumps all over you and he's out of his mind. And I love him to pieces, but man, it's a lot
of work.
It is.
A lot of work.
It is, and we're moving. We're moving to a new house,
wow.
And so he can't be in the house when people come look at our house because he's a maniac,
right?
And they're terrified of him because he's huge, and so so there's that. And then there's another 100 stories that I'll tell you another time about things that he's done and things that he's ruined.
Well, Matt, you mentioned allergies, and one of the things that I wanted to share was, my youngest, Jude, who you just met, has severe food allergies, and that really for us has been life-changing. The first time that we really discovered it, I actually was at work, and I was on a conference call, and it's very rare that at that time we actually had a nanny. It was very rare that I heard from her, and I was on the conference call and saw her calling, and I picked it up, and she, shared with me that she had fed him formula for the first time, and his lips were turning red, and English was not her first language, so I was kind of trying to figure out what was going on, but it sounded like he was okay, so I hung up the phone, went back to my conference call, and about a minute into the conference call, something inside of me just started saying, maybe that's not right, and I should get in my car and go home. So I excused myself from the conference call, got in my car. I was about 20, 30 minutes from home. And when I got home, Matt, he was covered from head to toe in hives. And this is like a 4-month-old.
Right.
And the doctor that we use is about 3 minutes from our house. So key still in hand, I literally grabbed him, put him in the car, drove to the doctor's office, and I walked into the doctor's office, and the doctor happened to be out in sort of the waiting area. She took one look at him, screamed, "Call 911." And from there, it was like the office went into just complete craziness. She was trying to figure out what was going on with him, because she said he must have gotten a peanut. What is going on? They said, all he's really had is formula. And, she decided to administer epinephrine to him. And, I went from a child who was barely breathing in my arms to, he could, all his airways opened up and he was able to breathe again. But that was our first introduction to a child that has, severe milk allergy, and we later also learned he has a similar allergy to eggs. So that has kind of added just an extra element, as Tom and I, one, if we travel, as we think about care for our children, all of that has really come into play.
Yeah, it's interesting because the kids now, because I know a couple of kids that have different types of allergies at that severe of a level, and it makes them so much more responsible and mature than my son and the other knuckleheads that he's friends with. They'll come up to me and say, look, I need to know what you put in that because I can't eat it. I brought my own food with me. And I'm just like, man, this kid's 11 and he's so on top of it. Has that happened to you? Does he become much more responsible because of that?
People have commented to me that they're, from the time he could speak, he started asking, is there milk in this? Is there egg in it? And he's learned because, he knows it really is a matter of life and death for him. Unfortunately, we've had mistakes along the way. These are such common allergens that they tend to be, milk and eggs tends to be in a ton of foods, and we've made mistakes. And so, on average, Matt, we've been in the hospital at least once a year over his life. So, 8, 9 times in the emergency room. So it's very scary. He's very aware. He's gotten much more comfortable, knowing that even though he doesn't like a needle being, placed in his leg, if he's starting to feel it, he immediately now says, give me the epinephrine.
Every kid grows up at a different rate, and some kids have to grow up sooner than others, and
Yeah,
it's
for
interesting.
sure.
But what it does is it also gives him a bit more empathy when he sees another kid who has something else, whatever that something is, and I find that that's a great byproduct out of it too. Like, I've got to deal with this thing, and that's amazing. Now, how about his siblings? I imagine they look out for him.
They do. They've been tremendous, and it's really hard for them when he has one of these incidents as well, because
Yeah.
they get scared, right? It's hard to see, your sibling, one struggling to breathe, and then getting rushed off to the hospital because as soon as you administer the epinephrine, he's got to go to the hospital. So they've been fantastic, and all three of them really have amazing hearts. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's another byproduct of it is the siblings become much more sensitive and aware of other situations, and maybe not eating ice cream right in front of him, or hopefully
That I wouldn't say so.
hopefully they're not taunting him, but it's
That might be taking it a little too far.
it's like that old Eddie Murphy skit where he keeps like rubbing the ice cream in front of the kid. Yeah,
He
that
just has his own place in the cupboard
yeah.
where all his special treats are. So
Now, if I remember right, you got involved in some kind of charitable organization or started one on your own. Is that still all going on? Because
yeah, so it's not one that I started, but I've been active for a number of years. I've done it less so recently, but it's called FAIR, and it is the Educational Society on Food Allergy Awareness. And they would have walks each year to raise money, and I did quite a bit of fundraising, um, to just bring awareness to food allergies. It's something I need to probably go back and do again.
sounds like you've done plenty.
Time that I could find.
Yeah, I was gonna say, look, it's been my pleasure getting to know you over all these years, but it took this to find out 4 or 5 things about you that I didn't know. So I hope that we can continue pulling on that thread, because there's a bunch of stories from all this that I think we should explore in another time. Is there anything that I missed, any stories or anything like that that kind of covers how your career and your family are so intertwined?
I don't think any additional stories, Matt, but I just want to tell you, I think that you leading this series, is such a tremendous, contribution. I think it's really valuable for everyone to see how each of us are handling, family and business at the same time. And, you sort of have to figure out what works for your family. But even in my experience, it's been talking to folks like Katie Arnold, or, my bosses like Fred and Greg, and seeing how other people have really handled balancing these two variables together to carve out what works for you. And so I think it's just tremendous that you're leading this series. So I want to say thank you to you.
You bet. I'm always been a family oriented type person. My dad just drilled it home. There's no place like home. The blood is thicker than water my whole life. And so I found after every conversation over all these years, all I kept talking about was family. I'd eventually get to their careers, but it was always about their kids, their spouse, their parents, their brother, their sister. And then it just hit me one day. I'm like, this is going to be valuable to someone else who's just starting a family or who's in the middle of a family situation. And they're like, you know what? Someone else is really successful, is going through the same thing I'm going through. And that's what I'm always trying to promote, is just the understanding that, number one, you're not alone. We're all going through and carrying this crazy baggage with the pandemic and our kids in school and are trying to balance our careers and everything else that's going on. And so it's something that connects us all. So I would say this to everyone. If you have a chance to speak with Ariel, I would highly recommend it. Certainly get to know Imperative Care, and Fred Khosravi is an icon within medical device. You couldn't learn enough from those folks. That's for sure. So I wanted to say thank you from the family business. where family is what binds us. Ariel, thank you so much for being on.
Thank you, Matt. Have a great day.
Take care.